300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malcolm with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me finally on a Wednesday morning. I know I've been gone a little bit. I had some broadcasting gigs in San Francisco, but I appreciate the continual support. We are back. We are back better than ever. I have a loaded show today. So first, I'm not going to touch on, I know there's been a lot going on both in the NFL free agency with regard to baseball, some different topics in the NBA that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. I'm not going to rehash everything, but because I haven't been here for about a week and a half or 2 weeks, and I know certain people wanted to hear my takes on different trades and different outcomes that ultimately happened from some of these different topics, I just want to give for about a minute or two my quick thoughts. So first, when it comes to Russell Wilson, I heard a lot of people asking me about, well, what did you think about Russell Wilson being traded to the Broncos? Let me just say very quickly, I think that it's absolutely a fantastic trade. I think he'll be rejuvenated. I think that he was a little bit depressed in Seattle. Not that they had a lack of talent, because they didn't, but I think he was just tired with the coaching staff and needed a new situation. So I think he's going to be absolutely fresh in Denver. And obviously you're seeing what type of impact that one free agent has and a great quarterback can have on other players gravitating towards him. I think case in point, Randy Gregory, who we just saw decline the same offer sheet from the Cowboys to go where? To go to Denver. Now, I know there's some clauses in there about guaranteed money and there are differences with that, but at the end of the day, someone from the Dallas Cowboys, from the NFC and the NFC East, was deciding to leave that easier division, leave that easier conference to go play for the Denver Broncos, to go play for Russell Wilson. He wanted to play for Russell Wilson over Dak Prescott. That's my 2 cents on that. So I love the trade for Denver. Happy for Russell Wilson. He's in a position and in a spot where it doesn't really matter if he's going up against the toughest division. He's got a great team around him. So that's number one. With regard to baseball, the MLB and the MLBPA finally agreeing on a new contract. Thank God. I mean, truthfully, it seemed like the sport was decaying. The popularization of the sport was dying, especially amongst the youth and the adolescents. So I think that this was absolutely necessary to get done for the MLB and the MLBPA. I understand both sides. Ultimately, I sided with the players. I understand what they were asking for, the changes that they hoped to be implemented. And I'm glad that ultimately they got something done. So that way there was only a 1 week delay at the start of the MLB season. Aaron Rodgers, not surprised he ended up staying in Green Bay. That makes perfect sense. All the hoopla, the drama in the offseason. I know he tried to frame it as this wasn't a financial thing. Well, it was, and that's okay. He's back in Green Bay. Great. Finally, last topic, quickly, Zion Williamson actually rejoined the Pelicans about a week and a half ago. I thought that was a big story. I couldn't talk about it because I wasn't here, but I think that it makes sense given the fact that At the time that he joined, they were on a hot streak. CJ McCollum had just joined the team. They'd won 4 straight. I had just gone to the Lakers game and had gotten humiliated after the Pelicans beat the Lakers by 28. So it is what it is. Doesn't surprise me that he decided to join the team right now. So that's kind of the quick hitters, but I'll save some of the rest for later. But I have to really start today's show with the most exciting sporting event that is about to take place, the NCAA March Madness tournament. The brackets were just released on Sunday. We had our first series of play-in games. Yesterday, I believe Texas Southern advanced. They punched their ticket. They're going to face Kansas. Indiana beat Wyoming. They are now in the big dance. 2 more games tonight to fully flesh out the rest of the bracket. But let me say this, because I want to preview this tournament. I've said this before, and I will say it again. The first 2 days of March Madness, that first Thursday and Friday of March Madness, are, to me, the 2 single greatest sporting event days in the calendar year. I understand that for a single event, people may argue, well, the Super Bowl is a more viewed event, or Game 7 of an NBA Finals I'd rather watch for that 3-hour period. But when you look at across the board for an entire 2-day stretch, that first Thursday and Friday, the excitement surrounding the sport, the enthusiasm for your college, if you're an alum, if you're an alum of that school, the unpredictability, the unexpected nature of the game, and it's all for nothing, and it's win or go home, and it's one game to decide it, and all the upsets and the bracket busting, all of that makes for such compelling drama and makes this event so incredible. And you've got obviously millions of people filling out the brackets, and there's a reason why Warren Buffett always offers $1 billion for a perfect bracket, is because you have a better chance of being struck by lightning 7 times than you do accurately predicting a perfect bracket. So absolutely love tomorrow and Friday, 2 favorite days of the year when it comes to sporting events. And this year in particular, it's very peculiar. It's very peculiar because there isn't really a unanimous and unanimous consensus number 1 overall team. Obviously, Gonzaga has they're the odds-on favorites to win the tournament, but there have been a lot of teams that have kind of flip-flopped as the number 1 team in the nation. There were stretches, obviously, where Gonzaga, yes, they were the number 1 team, but then Auburn for a good minute and a half, they were the number 1 team. Baylor rode it out a little bit. Purdue had a stretch or 2. Kansas, Duke gave it a run. So there were a lot of really good teams in the tournament that I think are more than capable of making a deep run. And I think there's a lot of pressure on the Big Ten. The fact that you have the most teams selected into the tournament, 9, versus this is what we had last year. 9 teams from the Big Ten were selected into the NCAA tournament. And the farthest a team had gone last year was Michigan in the Elite 8. They lost to UCLA. So there's a lot of pressure on the Big Ten again coming into this year's tournament to try to produce and get farther, advance farther than that. But I do want to start with, let me first say the West region, very interesting region. Ultimately, I'm going Gonzaga and Duke as the 2 teams to meet in the Elite 8 of that quadrant. I do think that one of the sleeping giants and perhaps a team that can upset the apple cart is Rutgers. If they can win tonight, the play-in game tonight, the 11 seed, I think they can have a similar type of run like UCLA had last year. I really believe it. Yes, it'd be difficult for them, but I love Ron Harper Jr. I think the guy's just got, he's got ice water in his veins. He's clutch. Geo Baker, they hit big-time shots. They had a streak of beating 4 consecutive ranked teams in the Big Ten at one point. They knocked off Purdue at home, the number 1 team in the nation at the time. This is a really good Rutgers team that I think could potentially not only make the Sweet 16, give Duke a run for their money in the Sweet 16. But ultimately, I have Gonzaga and Duke in the Elite Eight from that West region. Out of the South region, for me, this was tough, but I have Arizona and Villanova. I know that Tennessee is a legitimate threat, and they won the SEC. They probably shouldn't have been a 3 seed. They were probably more aptly fit to be a 2 seed. Needless to say, as a 3, I think that the clash between them and Villanova will be really interesting. But I like the veteran leadership on this Villanova team. I like Colin Gillespie being there. The fact that he has been a part of the program for so long. Obviously, Jay Wright, a sensational coach. And I know there used to be that stigma and that expectation that Villanova would crumble, much like Virginia with Tony Bennett for a couple of those years when they kept falling as the top seed. I understand that used to be the problem with Villanova. I don't expect that to be an issue anymore. And I just like that Villanova has been a really consistently good team all year long. And obviously Tennessee got going late. I think it'd be close, but I'm going to edge out Villanova in that instance. So I'd have Arizona and Villanova as the 2 teams meeting in the Elite Eight from that South region. I think they'd be absolutely fantastic. Arizona plays incredible defense. Obviously, Mathurin is a lottery pick. Koloko on the defensive end. They've got Krisa being able to shoot the 3 ball. They're a really, really good team. So I expect those 2 teams to finish in the Elite Eight out of that South region. In the East region, this is one of the toughest regions. To me, it's one of the toughest regions. You've got UCLA and you got Kentucky in that region. You got Baylor in the region. And I actually have UCLA and Kentucky meeting in the Elite Eight. And for me, yes, you can say this is partly heart over head, but I don't think Baylor is quite as formidable as they were last year. Now, the fact that they have managed to come back the following season after winning the national championship as a number 1 seed speaks to the job of Drew Scott and how incredible of a coach that he's proven to be and the culture he's been able to establish at Baylor for the Bears. They're a very good program. They're no joke. But ultimately, I just think UCLA with the experience, the fact that they made the Final Four run last year, everyone came back this year. They retained every single player. It's going to be tough against Kentucky, though. Those 2 teams, it's a clash of the blue blood programs. So I think that those 2 teams, though, are destined to meet in the Elite Eight out of that Eastern region. And out of the Midwestern region, I'll be honest, I am going completely with my heart over my head here. I'm just going to be honest. I've got Wisconsin and Kansas as the Elite Eight matchup. Here's what I would say, because I do think this is a very interesting matchup. Iowa, who won the Big Ten championship, is on the upper part of that quadrant. Wisconsin's on the bottom part. Here's the interesting thing about the Midwest region. So for Wisconsin, their first 2 games are played in Milwaukee. I remember when I saw that released out of the bracket, I thought, okay, well, that is a beautiful potential opportunity to go to the Sweet 16, because their first matchup against Colgate, second matchup between the winner of LSU and Iowa State, 2 very good teams. But I think the fact that they're getting a chance to play these games in Milwaukee, in their backyard, it's going to almost feel like a home game for them. And I think that will prove huge on the advantage side of things for the Badgers. I think they'd meet up with Auburn in the Sweet 16. And don't get me wrong, Auburn is a tremendous, tremendous team. And they might knock off Wisconsin. They're a very good team. They're a very strong 2 seed. I think they're the best 2 seed currently. There were stretches, as I mentioned, where they were ranked number 1 overall, and for good reason. Jabari Smith, obviously, not the consensus top pick in the NBA draft, but he's certainly being considered as a top 3 pick. Wendell Green Jr., one of the best assist guys in the SEC and on the team and in college basketball. You got Kessler, who rebounds the ball extremely well. This is a very good Auburn team. Bruce Pearl has done a really good job kind of transforming this program into a pretty formidable one. So that would be a difficult Sweet 16 matchup, but I do think it's one that Wisconsin can win, because as long as Johnny Davis can kind of take over. And he's, I think, a top 10 pick in the draft this year, which is something that Wisconsin has never, ever had. Then they can make some serious noise. And I think against Kansas, obviously, Ochai Ogbagji is an elite scorer. He's a tremendous player, averaging like 19 points per game. I love their transfer in Remy Martin out of Arizona State. I saw him play when he was with the Sun Devils, and he's a big-time pickup. And then, you have Bill Self, who's been around the block a couple times with this Kansas team. There's no question there's a lot of experience there. But I'm going hard overhead. And so in my final four, because I just laid out the Elite Eights from all those matchups, as I just mentioned, I think Wisconsin can eke out of that Midwest region. I'm praying for it. I'm hoping for it. It's probably hard overhead, but I also have Gonzaga out of the West region, Arizona out of the South region, UCLA out of the East region, and then Wisconsin in the Midwest. Again, it's tight, but when I look at, I laid out for Arizona how good defensively they are. For Wisconsin, they've got one elite player in Johnny Davis, and we saw the type of run Kemba Walker could go on with UConn in 2011 as a 3 seed. A one-man band, one-man wrecking crew just went off. I could see something happening with Johnny Davis as well. Obviously, his ankle's got to be healthy, but I could see it happening. UCLA has got the experience, so I could see them coming out and prevailing in that quadrant. And then Gonzaga, they're just extremely dominant. They are extremely dominant. Chet Holmgren is the real deal. This guy's 7'1", but he's got ball handling skills similar to KD. He gets to his spot. You can't block his shot. He averaged 4 blocks per game this year as a freshman. The guy is sensational, and I'd have those 4 teams as my final 4. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, I can't wait to see the final play-in games today. I'm telling you, if Rutgers wins today, watch out. Watch out. They could make some serious noise and damage in the tournament. So I want to transition to tennis because there's been a major tournament going on right now, Indian Wells. Obviously, for most kind of casual tennis observers, tennis fans, they're only familiar with the Grand Slams, the 4 Grand Slams, the Australian Open, the French Open, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open. But those are all best of 5 sets. There's a reason why they're called Grand Slams, but there are a lot of minor tournaments called Masters 1000, or in the women's side, the WTA 1000 tournaments, a little bit more minor. They're best of 3. So Indian Wells is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, kind of Masters 1000, WTA 1000 tournaments in the tennis world that there are every single season. It takes place in Palm Springs. It used to take place actually in La Quinta up until 1987. And it's a serious tournament. It's a serious tournament. It's a large purse. The winner last year won, I think, $1.2 million. So this isn't just kind of some small minor tournament. No, this is like a major minor tournament. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal in the tennis world. Last year, a lot of notable names didn't participate because of COVID. And obviously this year, the only notable names to not participate, Serena Williams obviously is recovering from a lower leg injury. Same thing with Roger Federer. He's recovering from a knee injury. Novak Djokovic was prohibited from playing because of the CDC preventing him from playing in the United States. But outside of that, a lot of the notable names have been present and have been playing. And when I look at the men's draw, because so far the first 3 rounds have been completed on the men's side. In the women's side, they're playing the quarterfinals, I believe, today. And the men's 4th round is today. So, well, it could be the quarterfinals are Friday or Thursday. That's kind of where we're at, though, in the middle of the tournament. But I want to start with the men's draw because there's a lot of interesting players that have advanced so far, one of which, Gael Monfils, who's 35, the Frenchman, just continues to to stay relevant. And I know a lot of people have kind of forgotten about Gael Monfils, and he is arguably perhaps the most athletic player to have ever played the sport. There's an argument to be made how crafty he is. When people think about Nick Kyrgios and kind of his eccentric personality, that used to be Gael Monfils, just a little bit milder, without the backlash, I guess you could say. And the commitment has always been there for Gael Monfils. He's a tremendous athlete, just kind of a wizard on the tennis court. His ability to slide and try trick shots. He's always been an entertainer. And so I'm happy for him at age 35. He's still participating. And he's doing well. He's into the fourth round. You got Cameron Nori still in as well. He won the Indian Wells tournament last year. Again, this is a guy who slowly started to ascend out of the UK. And it's not because he's a powerful player. He's not a power hitter. He is just very consistent. He's very consistent. His placement is excellent. And it's interesting because he's not trying to overpower you, but he's able to direct the ball extremely well. He's got that shortened swing on his backhand. It's a bit unorthodox how he generates power with that all through his hip turns. But the fact of the matter is he is starting to be ranked more consistently in these tournaments. And it's impressive that he's in the fourth round, with this loaded roster and draw. Jensen Brooksby, he was able to come back and actually beat Stefanos Tsitsipas in 3 sets. He got blown out in the first set 6-1. Tsitsipas was just dominating him, and to Brooksby's credit, he just hung in there. And this is an American, a young, promising American who is just fearless when he plays. He's got a lot of the strokes. It's just the confidence, whether he can go out and execute. And he's a guy who shows, unfortunately, he wears his emotions on his sleeve. And I say that because it makes it a little bit more visible to your opponent when he's frustrated. He doesn't shy away from trying to hide that, which can sometimes be a weakness at times. But this is a really talented young player, and arguably just collected his biggest win of his career against Tsitsipas. That was impressive. You've got still obviously Rafael Nadal, who is a perfect 17-0 in 2022, which is currently the longest active undefeated mark to start a season since I think Roger Federer did it, back in the mid-2000s. He's going up against Riley Opelka, another really talented 24-year-old American, 6'11". The guy is massive. He's got a massive serve, and he's really starting to play well. And this is a guy who's starting to advance to the fourth rounds in majors. He's challenging a lot of the best players. And for Rafael Nadal, that matchup's going to be super fascinating because whenever Rafael Nadal plays, and really whenever any member of the big three and an all-time great plays, they like to dictate points. They like to dictate tempo. They like to dictate and be in control. When you're going up against Opelka, you can't control the point because he's 6'11". He controls the point with his serve and with his racket. You kind of have to be reacting to the big shots that he's doing to then put yourself in position to be in control. But it starts with Opelka, and this guy is something special. He's really playing well. He beat Denis Shapovalov in the previous round, who's an up-and-coming player. So Opelka is really starting to come around. And again, that serve, 6'11", just absolutely ginormous. Tough to return. It's simply tough to return. You've got Nick Kyrgios still in the mix in the fourth round. His eccentric personality, we weren't sure if he was going to continue to play. There were some rumblings and rumors about him potentially retiring after the Australian Open. He just won the doubles tournament with his doubles partner, but good to see him playing and playing well. He's in the fourth round. You've got Matteo Berrettini, of course, who's in the fourth round, perhaps the biggest serve on the tour. Serves at about 138 miles an hour. I think he's clipped 140, maybe 141 at some point, almost reminiscent of Andy Roddick, the former American player who just had a rocket of a serve. And so you got those two guys that are still in it. You've got Taylor Fritz, who's the highest ranked American in the tournament, and he's got a great matchup against Alex de Minaur, a guy who he beat in the first round in a 5-set thriller at the U.S. Open. I was there, watched it at Louis Armstrong Stadium, and he's really coming around. Taylor Fritz is starting to find his groove, 6'6". He's got a nice wingspan to him. He's got solid strokes. His backhand can at times be stronger than his forehand, which is what's impressive about him. Obviously, the mobility at 6'6", and same thing with Opelka and John Isner, who's also in the tournament at 6'11", starts to be a little bit concerning because it's tough to move laterally like that at that big size, but he's actually a lot more athletic and mobile than you might think. Obviously, the son of a former professional female pro tennis player, Kathy May Fritz, was a player in her own right, so there's obviously tennis genes in that sense. So good for him. You've got Andre Rublev, who is he's an interesting cat because he's kind of part of that third tier of guys. So obviously you have the big three, and then the tier below them is kind of Daniel Medvedev, Zverev, you have Tsitsipas, and just below him, that's kind of where you have Andre Rublev, Denis Shapovalov, those two guys trying to crack into the top 5. He's kind of a 7 to 10 type of guy, but he's in the 4th round. He's very powerful. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent, but he's a tremendous, tremendous player, Andre Rublev. And then finally, as I mentioned, John Isner, a former American star, kind of slipped off a little bit, 6'11", another huge guy with a huge serve. There were times when he was starting to challenge in the Grand Slams. I think he crept up to as high as potentially 12th. Right now, he's still kind of in the, I think he's 32nd or the higher 20s. I have to check his ranking, but I'm glad to see that he is doing well at Indian Wells, of course, one of the biggest American tournaments of the season, along with the Miami Open. So that's kind of on the men's side. And then you look at the women's draw, and they're already in the quarterfinals. They're playing the quarterfinals, I believe, again tomorrow. You have Simona Halep, who won the event in 2015, 2-time Grand Slam winner, back in the quarterfinals. She's a really talented player. The American Madison Keys, who has really come on strong as of late, reached the final at the Australian Open this past year, lost to Ash Barty. But Madison Keys, another just ruthlessly fearless player, hits the ball extremely hard, pounds it from the baseline, forehand, backhand, doesn't matter. She's very talented, is really starting to have a nice 2022 campaign. She's through to the quarterfinals. Paula Badosa, who won the tournament last year at Indian Wells, back in the quarterfinals. So that's exciting. So it's very interesting to see, to be watching the tournament right now, to be seeing kind of some familiar names that maybe we had forgotten for a little bit back on the tour and playing well and already through the 4th round in the quarterfinals of Indian Wells. It's a tremendous, tremendous event to go to, Palm Springs, and it's fun for tennis fans to be watching that. So finally, before my Malkin's moments, I did want to talk about another story that developed from the Indian Wells tournament with Naomi Osaka and how she was tearing up in a post-match interview as she was addressing some fans who were heckling her during her match, which caused her to tear up in those post-match remarks. She ended up losing in the 2nd round of Indian Wells. 6-0, 6-4, was a little bit rattled by a fan who yelled, "Naomi, you suck." Obviously, in a usual quiet sport like tennis, everything is kind of amplified. You hear everyone's voice in the stadium, even just a little pin drop you can hear. So let me say this, because I think, for Naomi Osaka, obviously she's been a little bit more fragile as she's been, especially over the last couple of years, as she's been dealing with her mental health struggles, and it's deeply saddening to see. And I do empathize with her. I do sympathize with her, and hope that she can battle through this and get the help that she wants and needs. And obviously, she cited kind of a lack of joy as being one of the reasons, one of the contributing factors behind some of these shortcomings, and why mentally she's been a little bit more unstable than she had been before in the first couple years on the tour. So she's kind of at times tried to take some time away from the sport. We've obviously seen her just outright remove herself from tournaments. We saw that at the French Open. She was reluctant to engage in post-match interviews. In fact, again, the French Open, she totally withdrew her name from the tournament after the first or second round. So she's been battling with her mental health struggles for quite some time. And this was obviously the latest example to just kind of get exacerbated and to push her over the edge, because she felt the need to address the crowd after the match. And as dominant as she has been throughout her career, and she's already won 4 Grand Slams. She's a tremendous player, just I think 24 still, so very, very young. Since she's won the 2021 Australian Open, which was the last Grand Slam that she's won, that's the last tournament that she's won, period. Not only a Grand Slam, but that's the last even minor tournament that she's won. Right now she's ranked 78, so she's been such a dominant player for such a long time, but we've been seeing how that's really affected her game right now. And obviously I can remember back in 2001, you had the incident at Indian Wells with Serena Williams and her family, how Serena Williams was playing Kim Clijsters in the championship match. It was a 3-setter that Serena Williams won, but as her father Richard and her sister Venus were walking into the stadium, they were greeted by boos. The fans were booing Serena. They were booing her family, Venus, and her father Richard. And even when she won, there was just a cascade of boos in her direction. And I don't know if this was necessarily a race-related thing. I don't know if this was a form of a racist act back then, given the fact that you had this black athlete and this black family kind of dominating the sport at the time. You can argue it was. I don't entirely know, but the reality was they were booed. And as a result, they boycotted. Serena and Venus ended up boycotting the Indian Wells tournament for over a decade as kind of retribution and a little kind of sign of spite and vengeance towards the U.S. fans. They just boycotted the tournament altogether. And I'll say this, because when it comes to a sport like tennis, for the longest time, similar to golf, tennis has always been about class and about etiquette. And you think about where it originated. The first ever Grand Slam was established in 1884. It was Wimbledon in Europe. And you had very, very proper and noble individuals going to these tournaments. It's a grass court. It's white outfits. It's clean. It's pristine. You have these people living these lavish lifestyles, wearing these ostentatious hats, and it almost feels like they're sipping on libations, sitting in the stadiums. It is almost a sport for royalty and for the nobility. And so you don't have quote unquote fans watching, you have spectators. There's a difference. And it was very abnormal to experience jeering and heckling from fans. That really wasn't a part of the sport. It's quiet during points. There's a certain respect and reverence for the sport. It's clapping. You're extolling effort and performances. It would almost be the equivalent of attending an opera and you have someone who's inebriated yelling and screaming at the singers. That almost seems sacrilegious. Like you would not ever see that happen. And from that perspective, I understand where Naomi Osaka's coming from and how that seems so beneath fans for a sport like tennis where you really don't experience that too much. And I can tell you firsthand, playing in tournaments, you don't really hear heckling from fans. Again, it's a very respectful, etiquette class, sophisticated based type of sport. So I empathize with her situation. And I'm deeply saddened and I feel hurt for her that she has to battle through that. But at the same time, it is one of those situations where, unfortunately, I think she just has to power through it and has to understand that that is part of the adversity of being a professional athlete. And I'm not saying that just because she makes millions of dollars and tennis players make millions of dollars that they should be subjected to that, to those insults, to that heckling. Nor am I saying that just because someone pays hundreds or thousands of dollars to attend a sporting event like that, it gives them the license to yell and scream and heckle and say whatever they want. But I also think that it's really hard to regulate. They've tried to do it in the NBA. Sometimes basketball players can point out specific fans that utter racial slurs or just get in these back and forths that make the players uncomfortable, and you can point to security and point them out. It's harder to do in tennis when there isn't a cacophony of noise happening all the time. Players are focusing on the court. They can't see what someone yells from the very top stands and the top sections. It's just hard to regulate. And even Rafael Nadal came out and said as much as he empathizes with her and he does feel deeply saddened for her and hope that she gets the help that she needs, he also made the point of saying that tennis players need to be resilient and they have to be able to play through that adversity a little bit. And unfortunately, the only way to shut people up is to play tennis at a high level in this instance for her. And if you're Naomi Osaka, you have to recognize that if people are rooting against you or they don't like you and they sense this as a weakness, they're going to continue to do it because they know that it can get to you. And clearly it's starting to have an insidious effect on her because this has happened now for a long time, starting to affect her in tournaments and in matches. People are going to try to take advantage and exploit that if they don't like her, or they want her to lose, or they're rooting against her. So if you play well and you're able to overcome that, that's a way to kind of silence those people. And they'll probably refrain from heckling you next time. So again, I feel badly for her. I do. She shouldn't be subjected to that. She's a tremendous, tremendous talent. One of the all-time great people in the sport. Very kind of reserved, but you can just see she seems like a genuinely nice, likable person. And I hate that for her, but I also understand you are a professional athlete. That is a part of the game sometimes. It's unwarranted, it's uncalled for, but sometimes it happens. And you have to be able to handle that. You just do. Okay, final topic. My Malkins moments. I have some great Malkins moments for you. The Washington Capitals' Alex Ovechkin scored goal number 767. He passed Jaromir Jagr for third on the NHL's all-time career goals scored list. He scored it, funny enough, against the New York Islanders a game that the Washington Capitals won in a shootout 4-3. In fact, his former coach, Barry Trotz, when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup in 2018, is now the head coach for the Islanders. So it's funny that he surpassed Yeager's mark against Coach Trotz. This was the 37th goal of the season for Ovechkin. He's currently 5th in the NHL for the most goals scored. I think the most is 45 this year, so he's not that far off behind the lead. He's 36 years old. He's now scored the most goals by any European player ever. And he's done it, get this, in 1,256 career games. So now he only trails Wayne Gretzky's all-time mark of 894 goals. But again, he achieved that mark in 1,487 games. He's only 120, so he's only 127 goals behind. Still a daunting task, no doubt, but he may be able to pass that. And then next up is Gordie Howe's 801 career goals, which he amassed in 1,767 games played. So right now, Ovechkin, he's got an opportunity to close in further on both those guys. Perhaps in the next 2 years, he can pass Gordie Howe. Maybe next year, potentially, if he continues to play. And with Wayne Gretzky, who knows? Who knows? In college basketball, Tom Izzo set the record for the most career wins with one Big Ten school. He has won 663 Big Ten Conference games this year. He passed the legendary Indiana coach Bobby Knight for that mark. Obviously, Tom Izzo has been around for a long time, over 2 decades, obviously, with the Spartans program. They're in the tournament as the 7th seed. They got actually a really difficult first-round matchup against Davidson. Can't wait to see that one. Steph Curry's alma mater. But Tom Izzo, congratulations to him. Justified, well-deserved. He's a harsh coach, but he's a good coach. And it is reflected in that mark and in that record. For Michigan, the football program, they hired the first female assistant. In fact, Mimi Milan Bolden Morris will be the first female graduate assistant to work for a Power 5 football program. She's going to be working as an assistant coach with the quarterbacks. Here's the interesting thing about her. She was a former college basketball player. Played a couple years with Boston College, then played for the Georgetown Hoyas, and now joining the Maize and Blue to be an assistant coach of the football team. So good for her, good for Jim Harbaugh and the program for hiring her. Shout out to Greg Popovich for passing Don Nelson for the most regular season wins in NBA history. He's won the most regular season games now for any coach in NBA history. Greg Popovich with the San Antonio Spurs. Shout out to him. Major accomplishment. Obviously well respected. And finally, a couple breakout performances. Kyrie Irving and Karl Anthony Towns each scored 60 points on back-to-back games. Kyrie Irving scored 60 points last night in a 150-108 thrashing of the Orlando Magic. And listen, in a lot of ways, this is what makes Kyrie Irving's situation that much more painful for me, is because we all know how talented he is. But because of his refusal to get vaccinated, we just don't see him play in any of the home games. He's limited to just playing in the road games. But we know how spectacular of a talent that he is. And this is why the Nets, if he's able to play and if they're healthy with KD, are going to be so formidable. We obviously saw them blow out the 76ers. They're currently a really hot team. They've won 4 straight games. And again, when he's on like this, he's a showstopper. You walk through the turnstiles to see a guy like that. He's absolutely spectacular, and he and KD together, listen, it's a daunting duo. The question is whether he'll be allowed to play. That's the question. And on the flip side, you've got Karl Anthony Towns, who dropped 60 points against the San Antonio Spurs in a 149-139 victory. He set a franchise record. Obviously, Kyrie Irving set a Nets franchise record as well, but both of them set an NBA season high for 60 points, both New Jersey kids as well. So tremendous, tremendous performances from them. So that'll do it for me on this Wednesday. Again, appreciate you sticking with me on Morning Joe right here every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Twitter, you can follow me at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_JMalk97 on Instagram and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. So as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.